Mikhail KOSTARAKOS, dear friends and colleagues, dear students of the Simone Weil promotion. I have to start in saying that I feel, in a sense, quite intimidated. I did my military service in Germany and never made it higher than a corporal. I would never have envisaged to sit next to a 4-star general. So my old military environment comes back to me, and well, I'm truly impressed. Well, I would like to start by saying that the decision of the Council on 11th of December of last year to establish permanent structured cooperation was described by many observers as quite an important new step for the European construction. Commission spokesman Shinas, also a former student of the college, actually described it as a small step for Brussels, but a giant leap for the European construction. And Mrs. Mogherini also spoke about big step forward for the European construction as a whole. This permanent structured cooperation has as a distinctive element on the basis of Article 42, paragraph 6 and Article 46 of the Treaty on European Union, the binding nature of the commitments which the member states participating will enter in the context of this cooperation, but participation in the PESCO remains voluntary, and we all know that 25 of the 28 member states have actually chosen to participate. That means not all of the member states. There is certainly a considerable potential in this, what has quickly become known as PESCO, in terms of future evolution. And there are a number of very concrete projects. And I think we should all be very grateful that General KOSTARAKOS has actually agreed to come today to Bruges to actually enlighten us about this potential. General KOSTARAKOS has had, if I may call it like that, really a brilliant career. I was most impressed when I saw that you progressed from being a colonel in 2002 over the ranks of brigadier general, major general to lieutenant general, and in 2011 full general. So I think by all military standards, a brilliant career. You started in the domain of artillery as a young officer. I would just like to add, artillery was also the arm which was the original choice of Napoleon. So there are very distinguished historical examples for actually starting the military career in the artillery domain. You also were an expert at the beginning of your career of the Hawk missile system, which is a missile system which preceded today's Patriot missile system, which I think is very much known also by our students. I would also like to add that General KOSTARAKOS is surely no stranger to academia. General KOSTARAKOS is holding a political science degree from the law faculty of the University of Athens. So I discover here an interdisciplinary orientation. And he also holds an MSc in diplomatic and strategic studies. So clearly you are no stranger to academia, and you actually also told me that you currently try to explain in many different places the recent complex elements of evolution of European Union security policy and action. I think you are soon going to leave for the Munich gathering. We just spoke about this. So it's particularly intensive time with a lot of potential, and all the more grateful we are that you have taken out the time to come to Bruges. General, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Jörg, for your kind of introduction and for inviting me here today. Every time I listen to my CV, I feel very old. And when I see you, I certainly feel very old. But yes, the academia is not something in which I'm not involved. One part of my job here is to go and enlighten different audience throughout the world about what the EU is all about, what the EU is doing. And last week I was in Pakistan, and I was explained to your rector before that in Pakistan they believe that US and EU and UN, all of this is West. All of this is the same. So we are all the same. And my main job was to explain to them that EU and US and NATO are different things. The two are organizations, are institutions, and US is a country. So you need to understand that because these were not all the same. When I came back and I reported that yesterday in the morning meetings with my counterparts in the EU, someone told me, at the end, you are missionary. I mean, you go out and you spread out the good word about the EU. Well, okay, this is my job. But like the missionaries, I don't have to... the existence of God is not necessary when you spread out the good word. I mean, it may happen, and nobody will ask you this. So the things you will hear from me now are a lot of interesting things about PESCO, which is the talk of the town. And I will try to explain all this. But at the end of this lecture, I will enjoy to have any kind of questions from you, not only related to PESCO, but to everything that is related to defense and security within the EU. I'm at your disposal. So, going back to the original topic. Usually I begin my presentation in universities by explaining to the participants which institution I represent and its position and role in the whole EU organogram. Today, this will not be needed. You are almost familiar with the EU, therefore I move directly to what we are here to discuss, PESCO, and its potential, if any, to forward security and defense cooperation in the EU. And since we are here in an academic environment, you will not be surprised by the following disclaimer. What you are about to hear today, it will be personal opinions and thoughts which may not reflect necessarily those of the EU Military Committee, the External Action Service, or any European institution for that matter. I don't expect to need a lawyer after the end of this lecture, so this is clear. Having said that, let us begin with the basics and put the discussion into context. Why PESCO and why now? President Juncker had likened PESCO to a sleeping beauty. He said, and I quote, "It is time to wake the sleeping beauty up." Make no mistake, the prince that gave the kiss to the sleeping beauty and woke her up, he was not President Juncker. Actually, it was none of the current EU high-level officials. It was you, each and every one from you in this room or out in the streets. The streets of Bruges, the streets of Brussels, of Paris, London, Madrid, Berlin, Nice, Athens, everywhere. It is the nameless, faceless, but very powerful individual whose security feeling has been bluntly traumatized by cruel and barbaric terrorist attacks, but also by the actions of the revisionist nation that lies to our external eastern borders. The migratory crisis and the powerful dramatic images on the 8 o'clock news added another dimension to the experienced feeling of insecurity that prevailed. I call this individual powerful, and he is. He holds the power of his or her vote. This power cannot be ignored by the respective governments. One should never forget that governments are elected to serve the people. The same holds true for the European Union. This traumatized security feeling and the subsequent demand for its restoration are the driving factors for whatever changes we witness in the security and defense domain. Coming closer and cooperating has historically been the society's response in the face of common challenges or dangers. In the European Union's case, a relevant provision exists in the Lisbon Treaty. Not by coincidence, the idea of European integration in the security and defense domain goes further back than most people remember. In December 1931, in the outbreak of World War II, the French Prime Minister, Édouard Daladier, stated in front of the Senate, of the French Senate, "Against the return of events as those we are suffering from today, I conceive that a new Europe should have a wider organization than that which exists now. It will be necessary to multiply exchanges and perhaps envisage federal ties between the various states of Europe." As it often happens, this grandiose idea falls victim to its own scale. The post-World War Europe was not mature enough to adopt this idea in its entirety, and certainly not in the defense domain. The idea, though, was not dead. In October 1950, France's Prime Minister René Pleven proposed a new plan for the creation of a European defense community with West Germany, France, Italy, and the Benelux countries as members. It is ironic that this plan fell victim to the failure of its ratification by the very same nation that conceived it. The rest is history, and you know it very well. Since the end of the Cold War and for the following 25 years, Europe was overwhelmed by a feeling of euphoria, deriving from an unprecedented long period of peace and an equally impressive economic growth. The latter was to a certain point due to the peace dividend. Armed conflict in our continent was widely considered to be something of the past, to be found only in the history books. International problems could be solved by development projects, humanitarian aid, and donations. And of course, by the export of democracy and of our Western principles and values. War in general was considered to be a relic of the past, and so the military. The prevailing feeling was very clearly illustrated in the opening statement of 2003 European Security Strategy. This is the famous Solana strategy of 2003. Europe has never been so prosperous, so secure, nor so free. The violence of the first half of the 20th century has given way to a period of peace and stability unprecedented in European history. And then reality kicked in, and Europe was abruptly awakened. The EU Global Strategy, presented by the High Representative Vice President Madame Federica Mogherini summer 2016, acknowledged that the assumptions on which we had built our policies were not valid anymore, had they ever been so. The new reality was summarized in the following phrase of HRVP Mogherini forward in the EU Global Strategy. The purpose, even existence of our union is being questioned. Our wider region has become more unstable and more unsecure. A drastic change, of course, was needed. Despite the wide acknowledgement of this need, all habits die hard. Formalities threaten to block the way towards strengthening defense cooperation within the EU. The word defense remained a taboo in the high rises around Schuman Square. The answer to overcome these stumbling blocks was found in the Lisbon Treaty in the form of permanent structured cooperation, the well-known PESCO. Despite what one might think, and regardless of the common understanding of the challenges the European security and defense, agreeing on going this way with PESCO has not been an easy task. Diverging opinions, cautiousness, reluctance to undertake binding commitments, and certainly not in the defense domain, which constitutes the very core of national sovereignty, made this endeavor a very delicate one. Ambition and inclusiveness being the main controversial issues. The European way of doing things provided the solution to this Gordian knot. A compromise between ambition and inclusiveness was achieved. This compromise resulted in 25 out of 28 EU member states signing up for PESCO. The first win was achieved. So here we are today, 61 years after Rome and almost 80 years from the first seeds of European defense integration, not discussing anymore, but actually working on the realization of deepened European defense cooperation. Adopting a very tight schedule, on 11 December 2017, the Council adopted a decision establishing permanent structured cooperation. Even an initial list of 17 projects to be launched has been put together and waits for a formal Council decision to go ahead. These projects cover areas such as training, capability development, and operational readiness in the field of defense, each of them adding a piece to the jigsaw of European common security and defense. Germany and Italy are the lead nations in 4 of them each, while France and Greece lead with two of them respectively, and the remaining 5 are led by Belgium, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Slovakia, and Spain. Projects is only one out of the 4 basic components of PESCO. Binding commitments is the second one. Emphasis here is on the word binding. Provisions are in place even for the suspension of the participation of a member state in a project should it be documented in an annual PESCO review by the Council that it failed to uphold its commitments. Governance is the third basic component. Here, 2 layers of governance will exist. The first one at the level of the Council, and the second one at the level of the member states participating in any particular project. The first one guarantees that the Council will continue to provide strategic direction and guidance for PESCO, while the second one will provide operational guidance and oversight on the execution of the progress of the project. The last basic component, which is actually the most sensitive, is about third parties' participation in individual projects. I described it as sensitive since it will determine the participation of the United Kingdom in PESCO after Brexit. But it's not limited to UK. Other nations show great interest in participating in European defense projects, some of which would like to see the relationship between EU and UK extended to them as well. Dear friends, in theory, PESCO has the potential to lead the evolution of the European Union to a well-rounded global security provider. The projects that will be launched under its umbrella will not only address current operational shortfalls in our missions and operations, but they will also support the strategic autonomy of the Union in the future. Because one cannot declare strategic autonomy when they lack the tools to exercise it. Having a strong, active, and innovating defense industry, timely delivering state-of-the-art defense equipment, incorporating in-house developed cutting-edge technologies is paramount in order for the European Union to remain relevant in the game of shaping the future world. At this point, we should remind ourselves of the stated aim of PESCO: to jointly develop defense capabilities and make them available for EU military operations. This will thus enhance the EU's capacity as an international security partner, also contributing to protection of Europeans and maximize the effectiveness of defense spending. But PESCO is not the touchstone of European defense. No matter how efficient it may prove to be, it does not provide a comprehensive response to the problem at hand. Therefore, it is supplemented by 2 additional initiatives: the Coordinated Annual Review on Defense, or CART, and the European Defence Fund, or EDF. The 3 of them are kind of 3 musketeers that will support European defense, or, if you wish, the holy triad of it. Any discussion about PESCO would be incomplete if not touching upon these 2 initiatives as well, since the linkages between them are too strong to be ignored. It is well known that the multiplicity of different types of variants of main defense articles is the main problem that the European defense cooperation in the field faces. 28 national armed forces operate 19 different types, blocks or variants of combat aircrafts, or 37 models of armored personnel carriers. This situation has serious implications when discussing joint operations, where interoperability and maintenance are among the most crucial planning factors. But it also has financial implications even when these articles are in their camps or shelters. It has been estimated that any figure between 25 to 100 billion euros out of the 200 billion that are invested on an annual basis on defense from the European countries could be saved if there had been a better cooperation coordination among member states. The coordinated annual review on defense will try to put an end to this mere situation and to this waste of money. CARD is now on its trial run. Its results can lead to greater defense planning synchronization in the EU, to the identification of the capabilities that are needed, notably through the forthcoming review of the Capability Development Plan by spring 2018. It can also lead to the identification of potential opportunities for defense cooperation in the future, feeding into PESCO. Achieving enhanced defense cooperation could easily turn to be mere wishful thinking if not given the necessary initiatives to make participation more attractive. This is where the European Commission steps in, actively participating in this effort of External Action Service. The European Defence Fund and the European Defence Industry Development Programme will provide substantial support to eligible PESCO projects and throw real money to supplement and amplify national investments in defence research, in the development of prototypes and the acquisition of defense equipment and technology. This is the state of play today. If you're listening to what I had told you so far, and you got the impression that everything is fine and that the difficult part is behind us, then I have fooled you. The real work in every project begins when the conceptual phase is over. When whatever has been decided and agreed upon will be up for implementation. This will be the real test for the honesty of purposes and the validity of commitments. As the 19th century Prussian military commander Helmut von Moltke put it, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And this is where we stand today. Let me elaborate on this. PESCO has to deliver. Theological discussion about institutional setups, including all the wishful thinking about what will happen now that PESCO is here, do not touch upon the only important question. Can PESCO deliver in the real world? Does it contribute to European defense? So let us move from theory and examine facts. Fact number one. Defense industry plays a central role in strengthening EU's defense. I have already explained the reason, and we could spend hours and hours exchanging more arguments to support this. This role and its importance are indisputable. Fact number two, equally indisputable, defense industries in Europe come in all different sizes today. There are the large multinational enterprises who dominate the market, and there are the small, medium enterprises that guarantee the security of supply for national armed forces. They compete for a piece of the pie and for their survival. Fact number three, no defense industry, no matter its size, is a non-profit organization. They are all trying to make profit, and there is no evil there. They have employees to pay and shareholders to report to. They all try to maximize profit, and this is legitimate. From the other side of the hill, From a purely economic point of view, European Union should seek to maximize the output of its investment. This is also legitimate and the demand of the taxpayers. The question is, how should we define output? By the quantity of items delivered? By the number of projects launched? By the number of patents or breakthroughs accomplished? By the increase in industry's annual revenues? All these questions remain to be answered. Fact number 4. When examining defense, only the end user's point of view is relevant. And the end user of defense capabilities and the bearer of military expertise is the military. I therefore argue that in order to maximize the effect of PESCO projects and the output of European investments in defense, the military should play a central role together with the industry. What should that role look like? When it comes down to defense, it is the military who knows the best about shortfalls it faces and capabilities it needs. It is the military who knows the best what is considered critical and what is a nice-to-have capability. It is the military who has the access to who has to assess its capabilities against possible illustrative scenarios, identify the gaps, express them in future projects, and finally, prioritize them. These projects are then communicated to the industry, which in turn provides options and solutions to address these shortfalls. Finally, it should be up to the military to evaluate the level any given project satisfies its requirements with reference to parameters such as usability, deployability, sustainability. Industry, from its part, drawing from its own expertise, may also provide new ideas for the military to examine their relevance, calculate the risk, and consider the feasibility. But in the end, it is not the chicken or the egg dilemma. The roles in this relationship are well defined. This, at least, is what we, the military, this is what we think. The next point I want to make is about PESCO governance. Transparency and the establishment of a common set of governance rules for projects are the foundations for any cooperation that longs to last. They build trust and remove any shadow of cautiousness. It is fundamental for all participants to know that the same rules apply to everyone if one truly wants to build a team spirit. Mistakes made in the past in other domains, mistakes that generated grievances and at the national level and splits in the EU should lead to well-educated decisions in the defense domain. One could add to the list the potential collateral losses, the ambition that should govern PESCO. It is argued that the compromise reached in order to achieve inclusiveness to the maximum point has already inflicted damage to the level of ambition of this endeavor. They back their argument with the numerous examples of polyphony turned into cacophony within the EU institutions. I do not share their position. I believe that it is up to the interested member states to raise the level of ambition they deem relevant by proposing and supporting the launch of respective projects. Inclusiveness is paramount for the cohesion of the EU. Dear colleagues, dear friends, these are some of the sensitive issues that, if not given appropriate attention, they might undermine, if not derail, the permanent structured cooperation. I remain optimistic and confident that this will not be the case. I know that a large number of European capitals have invested political capital in getting PESCO that far. PESCO has the potential to be a game changer in the way we in Europe handle our defense. The way it has been drawn, and it may lead in due time to political integration in Europe. But that's too far in the future. Before reaching this point, it needs to deliver tangible defense results. The first is the political objective for tomorrow. The second is the people's demand for today. demand for more security. These two objectives are not exclusive, neither contradictory. Focusing on the second, PESCO can change the way member states' national defense institutions regard cooperation with each other. Achieving quick victories in not that ambitious projects will prove both the added value PESCO has and the benefits for participants. This will in turn lead to more cooperation in more ambitious projects, making it a self-sustained process. Until this happens, it needs our full attention to identify and remedy teething problems that will most certainly appear. But it would be unfair to be quick to jump into conclusions about its efficacy and even more to abandon or stop this initiative. I would parallel the situation to a parachutist having just jumped out of an aircraft. There is no turning back. He has to do everything by the book if he is to survive the landing and stand up to his feet without injuries. If he does so, he will take on future challenges with renewed self-confidence. If not, then the consequences will follow him for the long time. We, all the individuals, institutions, teams, or committees of the European Union, we will do our best to have a good landing and a successful PESCO. I will stop here and I welcome your questions or remarks. Thank you very much.